The first sensation was a dull throb behind my eyes, a persistent ache that seemed to resonate with the sterile white ceiling above. Disorientation was a physical weight, pressing down on my chest, making each breath a conscious effort. Where was I? The last clear memory was a sun-drenched afternoon, the scent of rain on hot pavement, the echo of laughter. Then nothing. A vast, terrifying expanse of forgotten time stretched out before me. The room was undeniably a hospital room. The faint smell of disinfectant, the quiet hum of machinery, the crisp, impersonal sheets. A kind-faced nurse, her name tag reading Brenda, explained gently that I was Elise Vance, and I had woken up with retrograde amnesia. The last 3 years were simply gone, like pages ripped from a book. Great. Days bled into each other. Brenda was a constant, soothing presence, managing my IV, answering my hesitant questions, and monitoring my vitals. She spoke of my arrival, the initial shock, and the subsequent medical evaluations. She mentioned a wife, a CEO, someone named Serafina Vance, who had been contacted but hadn't appeared. 3 days. 3 days in a hospital bed, grappling with the shattered past, and not a single word, not a single visit, from the woman who was supposed to be my wife. The nurse's tone was professional, but a subtle undercurrent suggested she, too, found the absence noteworthy. It wasn't a sign of concern. It felt more like inconvenience, as if my amnesia was just another troublesome detail in Serafina Vance's meticulously managed life. My mind, despite its fractured state, clung to whispers of a Serafina. Not the CEO, not the absent wife, but a woman whose image flickered at the edges of my consciousness like a half-forgotten dream. A warmth, a connection, a spark that felt profoundly, irrevocably real. How could I feel such a pull towards someone I couldn't remember? The nurses spoke of Serafina Vance with hushed reverence, the titan of industry, the steely-eyed executive who commanded boardrooms and built empires. Yet, in the fractured mosaic of my mind, there was a Serafina who was also the woman of my dreams, the anchor of my heart. It was a bewildering dichotomy. The amnesia had stolen my past, but it hadn't erased the phantom limb of love, the deep, intuitive understanding that this woman, whoever she was now, was intrinsically linked to my deepest self. But then, the memories, or rather the instincts, that did surface were of a different nature. A fierce independence, a refusal to be steamrolled. The name Elise Vance wasn't just a label, it was a statement. I was a fighter, a woman who knew her worth, who wouldn't tolerate mistreatment. This amnesia was a profound vulnerability, but it hadn't stripped me of my core. If my wife, this formidable CEO, saw my condition as a tantrum, as merely causing trouble, then she was about to learn that Elise Vance, amnesiac or not, did not respond well to being dismissed or undervalued. The thought of her coldness, the implied lack of care, ignited a defiant ember within me. I might not remember what happened, but I knew what I wouldn't stand for. The dream woman I vaguely recalled and the ice queen the hospital staff described felt like two different people, and the latter was already failing to impress. The dream was fading, replaced by a growing unease, and a stubborn resolve to reclaim not just my memories, but my dignity. The day I was discharged felt like stepping out of a sterile, predictable box into a world that was both familiar and utterly alien. The assistant, a sharp-featured woman named Chloe, whose efficiency was almost unnerving, met me at the hospital entrance. Her tailored suit exuded an aura of quiet power, mirroring, I presumed, that of her boss. She spoke in clipped professional sentences, guiding me into a sleek, obsidian black car that hummed with quiet luxury. The drive itself was a blur of unfamiliar cityscapes, interspersed with glimpses of what must have been Serafina Vance's extensive corporate holdings, imposing glass towers bearing her name. The destination was less a house and more a statement. A sprawling mansion nestled amidst manicured grounds. A fortress of stone and glass that whispered of old money and immense success. Chloe informed me with a practiced nod. My home. My home. The word felt foreign, unearned. Chloe led me through vast, echoing halls, past museum-quality art and antique furniture, a testament to a life of extreme privilege. My room, when she finally opened the door, was a startling revelation. It wasn't the minimalist, sterile space one might expect from a CEO's wife, but a vibrant, eclectic sanctuary. Walls were lined with shelves overflowing with books, classics, philosophy, art history. Bold, abstract paintings adorned the walls, and a well-worn easel stood in a sunlit corner, paint-stained and inviting. It was my taste, my aesthetic, a perfect reflection of the fragments of memory that flickered within me. This, Chloe explained, was a gift from Serafina, delivered during our first anniversary before my accident. A wave of conflicting emotions washed over me. These weren't just gifts, they were declarations. The room was a personalized haven, meticulously curated. It spoke of attention, of deep understanding, of someone who truly saw me. Had Serafina, the distant CEO, gone to such lengths for the woman she loved? Was her coldness in the hospital a facade, a result of the immense pressure of her work? Perhaps she had been drowning in corporate crises, unable to manage the emotional fallout of my amnesia and the sudden disruption to her life. The thought offered a fragile solace, a hope that the dream woman I vaguely remembered might still exist beneath the hardened exterior. I found myself wanting to believe that her absence was due to overwhelming responsibility, not indifference. This hesitant hope was brutally extinguished barely an hour later. The heavy oak door to my wing of the mansion swung open with a force that announced its occupant. Serafina Vance stood there, a formidable presence in a sharp, tailored suit, her expression unreadable, a mask of glacial control. Beside her stood another woman, younger, with an unsettlingly predatory grace. Her eyes, dark and assessing, flickered over me, not with curiosity or concern, but with a possessive glint that sent a shiver of unease down my spine. She was beautiful, undeniably so, but there was a sharpness to her beauty, an edge that spoke of ambition and entitlement. She leaned against Serafina's side, a subtle gesture that screamed ownership, her presence a deliberate provocation. The air crackled with unspoken tension. Serafina's gaze, cool and direct, met mine. "Elise," she began, her voice a low, measured tone that offered no warmth. "I trust you're settling in. Chloe has ensured your comfort. Now," she paused, her eyes flicking dismissively towards the other woman. "I want you to cook dinner for us. Both of us." The request landed like a physical blow. Cook for them? Me? The woman who had just woken up with a shattered mind? It wasn't a request. It was a command, an insult, a blatant assertion of dominance. It stripped away any lingering illusions I had about Serafina's supposed concern. This was a power play, a humiliation. The other woman smirked, a small, triumphant curve of her lips, as if relishing my discomfort. Nope. It was too much. The lingering fragments of my former self, the fiercely independent Elise Vance, surged to the surface. I wouldn't be a pet, a maid, or a simp. Not now, not ever. My gaze hardened, meeting Serafina's cool stare. Without a word, I turned my back on them. The echo of her words, "cook dinner for us," ringing in my ears like a death knell. For any hope of a happy reunion, I walked out of the room, out of that wing, and out of the mansion, the heavy front doors slamming shut behind me, ignoring whatever bomb that set off behind it. The sprawling grounds of the mansion, which had initially seemed impressive, now felt like the confines of an opulent prison. I wandered aimlessly, the city noise a distant hum, my mind a whirlwind of confusion and burgeoning anger. My own home, filled with gifts that felt like subtle taunts, and a wife who treated my condition like an inconvenience, then demanded I serve her and her companion. The dream woman, from my fragmented memories, was nowhere to be found, replaced by this cold, authoritative stranger who seemed to relish my helplessness. And now any chance for reconciliation in my heart had been ruthlessly stomped on by Serafina. I needed grounding. I needed information. I needed someone from my life before the fog descended, someone who could tell me who Elise Vance truly was, and what had happened to make her life this complicated. My fingers, still a little shaky, dialed a number from the contacts list on the sleek phone Chloe had provided. Anya. The name resonated with warmth, with shared history, with the easy camaraderie of old friends. The call connected, and after a few rings, a voice answered, a voice that was instantly familiar yet tinged with an unexpected frost. Hello? Anya's voice was sharp, lacking its usual welcoming lilt. Anya? It's Elise, I began, my voice hesitant, hopeful. I've had an accident, amnesia. I don't remember anything from the last 3 years. I paused, waiting for the flood of concern, the questions, the immediate offer of support. Instead, there was a loaded silence, thick with an emotion I couldn't quite decipher. Then, Anya spoke, her voice dripping with a disdain that chilled me to the bone. Elise, you're kidding me. 3 years of hell and now you pull this? What are you talking about? 3 years of hell? Confusion warred with a prickle of alarm. What happened? What did I do? You think I'm going to help you win her back? Anya's laugh was harsh, devoid of humor. After everything you put me through, everything you did. Anya, please, I pleaded, the hope dimming rapidly. I was in the hospital after an accident. I forgot everything. I don't remember anything. My voice cracked. The isolation felt crushing. My supposed wife was with a stranger, her assistant, sure as hell wasn't going to explain anything to me, and now my best friend was treating me like a villain. I took a deep breath, trying to regain some semblance of control. Anya's breath was still coming from the other side, so that meant there was still a chance. I'm divorcing her, Anya, I stated, the words surprisingly firm, a decision made in that instant. I don't want her if this is the reality, but I need to know what my life was before this amnesia. I need to know what I was like, what I did. You're the only one I can think of who might tell me the truth. There was another pause, a longer one this time. The call still was connected, and Anya seemed to be thinking. Hard. It seemed my declaration of divorce had shifted something, chipping away at the wall of her resentment. The anger was still there, palpable, but perhaps a sliver of curiosity or even pity had begun to creep in. Divorcing her, huh? Anya's tone softened infinitesimally, but the bitterness remained. Fine. If you're really going through with it, if you're finally walking away from that obsession, then maybe I can tell you a little bit about the woman you were. But don't expect me to be happy about it. And don't expect me to help you get her back. Because honestly, Elise, you don't deserve her, not after what you pulled. The implication hung heavy in the air, a dark cloud over the fragmented life I was trying to reclaim. Anya's voice, once the sound of comforting familiarity, was now a conduit for a devastating narrative. The disdain that had coloured her initial reaction began to make a terrible kind of sense as she spoke, her words painting a picture of a past Elise that was almost unrecognisable, yet disturbingly plausible given my current disorientation. You don't know the half of it, Elise, she began, her voice low. For years, you were consumed, absolutely consumed by Serafina. She spoke of a relentless pursuit, a singular focus that had eclipsed everything else. My friendships, including Anya's, had withered and died under the relentless pressure of my single-minded devotion. You cut off everyone, Anya stated flatly, the accusation hanging in the air. Family, friends, anyone who wasn't Serafina, anyone who questioned your fixation. You became a ghost to us, Elise, existing only in the orbit of your wife, and you caused her so much trouble. Trouble? The word felt like an understatement when Anya elaborated. She described instances of public confrontations, veiled threats made on my behalf, a relentless campaign to prove my devotion, my love, my worth, to a woman who, by Anya's account, seemed increasingly distant and perhaps even resentful of this fervent, suffocating pursuit. It painted a picture of Elise Vance as a desperate, unhinged woman willing to sacrifice her own well-being and relationships for a love that felt increasingly one-sided, or at least unreciprocated in the way I craved. The woman who became the thing I vowed to destroy, a simp. Then came the explanation of the other woman, the one who had stood so possessively beside Serafina at the mansion. That woman, Anya said, her voice hardening, the one you saw with Serafina, that's Isabella Rossi. She's a student Serafina's been mentoring for years. More than that, she's Serafina's first love, Elise. From before you, from a time when Serafina was different. And Isabella, she's a real bitch, and you fell for her tricks every time. Like, oh my God! Anya's words were a cold slap of reality. The scene at the mansion, Serafina's coldness, Isabella's predatory gaze, it all clicked into a horrifying, coherent picture. It wasn't just about my amnesia. It was about a long simmering animosity, a carefully orchestrated game. Serafina didn't care about my amnesia. She probably didn't even know I had it. She had brought Isabella into my life to provoke me, to remind me of my supposed transgressions, and perhaps to subtly gauge my reaction. Isabella, fueled by years of resentment and likely encouraged by Serafina's own emotional distance, was being used as a weapon, a living embodiment of my past perceived sins. So, Anya concluded, her voice laced with a grim satisfaction, Serafina is using Isabella to get under your skin, to remind you of the trouble you caused. And Isabella, she's just happy to have an excuse to torment this woman she believes ruined her life. The weight of these revelations settled upon me, heavy and suffocating. The amnesia had been a shield, protecting me from the knowledge of my past self's actions. But now, with Anya's words, the shield was cracking and the painful truth was seeping through. I wasn't just a victim of amnesia. I was also a character in a drama I had helped create. A drama where my wife and her first love were poised to exact a kind of revenge. The embossed invitation felt like a gauntlet thrown down. Serafina Vance's birthday party, mandatory attendance. After the revelations from Anya, after the humiliation at the mansion, the idea of attending felt like walking willingly into a viper's nest. Yet, a strange compulsion, a need to confront the reality of my situation, to perhaps glean more information, or even just to assert my presence, drew me in. I donned a simple, elegant black dress, a safe choice that wouldn't betray any hint of my internal turmoil, and arrived with a carefully constructed mask of cool detachment. The mansion was transformed, glittering with lights, filled with the murmur of high society chatter, and the strains of classical music. Serafina, as expected, was the picture of poised perfection, a queen holding court. Isabella, however, was a discordant note, her eyes constantly scanning the room, eventually finding mine. She approached with a syrupy smile that didn't reach her eyes, Serafina a silent, impassive observer a few feet away. "Elise," Isabella purred, her voice dripping with false sweetness. "So glad you could make it. Serafina was worried you might have forgotten." Her gaze swept over me, a clear challenge. Before I could formulate a response, before I could even process the thinly veiled threat, she took a deliberate step forward, her hand brushing against my arm as if by accident. It was just enough. The subtle nudge sent me stumbling backward, my heels catching on the polished marble floor. With a yelp, I lost my balance and plunged into the large, ornate swimming pool. The shock of the icy water stole my breath, the world dissolving into a chaotic swirl of blue and chlorine. As I thrashed, disoriented and sputtering, my eyes found Serafina. She was standing at the edge of the pool, her attention solely focused on Isabella, who had, by some miracle, fallen in beside me. Instead of reaching for me, her wife, the woman who had just been thrown into the water, Serafina's hand shot out, pulling Isabella to safety with a speed and urgency that was starkly evident. It was a brutal, public display of preference, a confirmation of where her loyalties lay. I was left floundering, the cold water seeping into my bones, mirroring the chill that had settled deep within my soul. Just as panic threatened to overwhelm me, a strong hand grasped my arm, pulling me from the water. "Anya." She had evidently come, perhaps to keep an eye on me, perhaps out of a sense of obligation. Her face was grim, her grip firm. Her mouth was open but not moving, though I knew what she was thinking. "You idiot!" Shivering, gasping for air, I stumbled back onto the terrace. Serafina and Isabella stood together, dripping but seemingly unharmed. Isabella clinging to Serafina's arm as if for protection. The casual indifference on Serafina's face as she looked at me truly looked at me, not as a guest, but as someone who had inconveniently disrupted her evening was the final straw. The lingering hurt from the forgotten years, the sting of Anya's words, and the visceral betrayal of being ignored seen firsthand, it all coalesced into a white-hot rage. How could I have tolerated this for 3 years? Why? What the hell happened to you, Vance? I was no longer cold, despite the pool water still clinging to my skin. I strode towards my wife, ignoring my soaked dress's weight, my heart pounding a furious rhythm. Serafina's face expanded in my view, with that cold, indifferent look she wore around me. I was sick of it. Sick of her. Before she could even open her mouth to scold me for causing trouble, I raised my hand. The sharp, stinging sound of my palm connecting with her cheek echoed, stunned the rest of the party. "Divorce," I choked out, the word raw with pain and fury. "I want a divorce. Now!" The words hung in the air, a demand that shattered the facade, and in Serafina's eyes, for the first time, I saw not coldness, but a flicker of shock, of dawning realization. She was losing control of her simp. It was as if the slap, the public humiliation, had finally pierced through her carefully constructed emotional armor. The aftermath of the slap was a maelstrom of emotions. The guests at the party, a tableau of frozen expressions, stared in shocked silence. Serafina, her face flushed, took a step back, her hand instinctively going to her cheek. Her carefully composed mask had finally fractured, revealing a woman shaken, perhaps even wounded by the raw display of my pain. Isabella, momentarily forgotten, stood nearby, her expression a mixture of fury and dismay, her carefully laid plans apparently unraveling. "Elise, wait." Serafina's voice was different now, tinged with a vulnerability I hadn't heard before. It's not what you think. Isabella and I, it's a misunderstanding. I can explain. I'll change, Elise. I swear I will. Please, let me try to fix this. Her words, the plea in her eyes, were a stark contrast to the icy indifference of mere moments ago. She reached out a tentative hand towards me, her fingers trembling slightly. I laughed, raising my hand again, causing her to rescind it. No, I said, my voice firm, cutting through her plea. I don't want explanations. I don't want promises. I want out. I turned away from her, from the party, from the life that had become a tangled mess of forgotten betrayals and present indignities. The mansion, with its gilded cage and suffocating opulence, no longer held any allure. The next morning, I didn't wait for Chloe or any further communication. I walked out, taking only what I needed. My focus shifted immediately. I needed to remember not just my past relationships, but my past self. My career, my purpose. I found my way back to Vance Corp's headquarters, the imposing glass tower that bore Serafina's name, but also, as I was beginning to realize, my own professional legacy. Walking into the bustling offices, I expected suspicion, awkwardness, perhaps even outright hostility. Instead, I was met with a quiet awe. My amnesia seemed to have acted not as a handicap, but as a strange catalyst. The fragments of memory I had, combined with the innate skills that resurfaced, had sharpened my edge. My decisiveness, my analytical prowess, my ability to cut through corporate jargon and identify strategic opportunities. These weren't just intact, they were amplified. The years I had apparently spent chasing Serafina, the time I had lost to that obsession, had dulled these skills. Now, stripped of that singular focus, I was like a whetstone that had been sharpened. I dove into work, into complex negotiations, into strategic planning, and found a profound sense of competence and clarity. The boardroom, the spreadsheets, the market analysis, this was my domain, a place where my intellect and drive were valued. My decisiveness, which had likely been perceived as stubbornness or obsession in my personal life, was now seen as visionary leadership in my professional one. The amnesia had been a terrifying disruption, but in the crucible of rediscovery, it was also proving to be a strange kind of liberation, forging a stronger, more resilient Elise. The final decree of divorce arrived like a cool, clean breeze, sweeping away the last remnants of confusion and emotional turmoil. As I held the official document in my hand, the last vestiges of the fog that had shrouded my mind finally dissipated. The board, shaken by her infidelity and awed by my rapid rise in my career, called for an emergency meeting. Serafina stepped down with her golden parachute, but not before peppering me with waterfalls of texts and missed calls. I didn't care. I could block all the numbers she sends me. I began to remember the past, every sharp needle. It wasn't a sudden dramatic surge, but a gentle unfurling, a slow, steady reassembly of the shattered pieces of my past. Every forgotten moment, every obscured feeling came flooding back with startling clarity. I remembered the whirlwind romance, the dizzying heights of falling in love with Serafina, a love so profound it had felt like destiny. And then, the memory of the car crash, the fateful event that started this all. A horrific, screeching symphony of metal and glass. I remembered the blinding headlights, the sickening crunch, the desperate need to protect the woman I loved. It was me, Elise Vance, pulling Serafina from the wreckage, shielding her from the flames, ensuring her survival at the cost of my own immediate safety. My actions had been pure, selfless, born from a love that transcended fear. It was this act of heroism, of undeniable devotion, that had, in the aftermath, led to our marriage. Serafina, grateful, perhaps even guilt-ridden, had proposed, and I enthusiastically said yes. We had fallen into a whirlwind love, explaining all those books and other intellectual gifts she left me. I sold them to a nearby academy. Everything else she gave me, I tossed out. But the truth, as it often does, had a cruel, bitter twist. The memory of the aftermath surfaced next, tainted with deceit. Isabella Rossi. She had been there, somehow, in the chaos, and had managed to spin a narrative. She had taken the credit for my actions, portraying herself as the rescuer, the one who had pulled Serafina from the inferno. My own devoted simp behavior had been twisted into a tale of manipulation, of me tricking Isabella into stepping down so I could take the credit, or worse, of me somehow engineering the entire situation to my own benefit. The story had taken root, festering over the years, fueling Isabella's burning hatred, and apparently influencing Serafina's perception of me. She had come to believe, or at least allow herself to be convinced, that I was the villain. Her coldness, her neglect, her passive-aggressive games, they were all born from this deep-seated, manufactured resentment. But she chose to do that to me. And I, Elise Vance, like a fool, clung to her like a moth setting itself on fire to light her candle. Now, standing in my new, modest apartment, the divorce papers a symbol of my hard-won freedom, I understood everything. The pain, the confusion, the deliberate cruelty. There wasn't much to say about how things are now. Maybe the dream woman I had was somewhere else in the future. Maybe I would finally travel to all those places I talked to Serafina all about, while she rolled her eyes and read financial news on her tablet. And maybe she could also find someone new too. I remembered the last time Serafina and I talked. It was after she trashed everything in the mansion that reminded her of Isabella Rossi. Apparently, someone sent her the ancient security footage of me pulling her out of that car back then. She glared at me, but I was unfazed. "You look like shit," I said, surveying the wreckage. It looked like a hurricane. "Why didn't you tell me that it was you?" I laughed. "Would you believe me?" Silence, followed by a thud from her collapsing to her knees. Then she said weakly, "Can we start again? I know it was you, and that everything you did for me and the company. I told her, laughing as if I heard the funniest joke. "Look, I bothered you for the last 3 years, and you treated me like a simp. We're even.